quite a lot of stuff to discuss. So with that, we will get right to it in the Streets of New Capenna Rules Primer. So the first thing I wanted to do was talk a little bit about each of the guild mechanics or family mechanics, whatever the trade term is for the three color combinations that we have now. Starting with Connive. So what Connive means is draw a card, then discard a card. And if you discarded a non-land card, then you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So a couple of interesting things that are not immediately obvious from that description is that a creature can connive even if it's not in play. This is sort of like how a Mogg Fanatic can still deal damage to a permanent, even though it is not in play anymore at the time when it's instructed to deal that damage. So that would mean that if I were to activate the ability of Hypnotic Grifter here, and my opponent used a Lightning Bolt in response against the Hypnotic Grifter, then I would still get to draw discard. I would not get to put a +1/+1 counter on, obviously, but I would still get the draw discard part. So that is one kind of interesting and not necessarily immediately obvious fact about conniving. Another interesting fact is Connive X. So there's, I think, only one card in the set that has Connive X, but that means that you would draw and discard X cards, and you would get a +1/+1 counter for each non-land card that you discarded. Now notice that is slightly different from conniving at 1 X times. Mostly in terms of if you had a replacement effect such as Doubling Season that would interact with putting the +1/+1 counters on, or you know, maybe Hardened Scales would be a better example. But if you do have a Connive X, that is what that means. So one other kind of interesting thing about Connive would be this specific card here. So the Psychic Pickpocket, you notice when it enters the battlefield, it connives, and when it connives this way, then you get to bounce a non-land permanent. So the interesting thing is we learned on the previous slide, right, that it was possible for it to connive even if it was not on the battlefield anymore. But another interesting thing is can you return a permanent if they Lightning Bolt the Psychic Pickpocket in response to the Connive triggered ability? You can go ahead and react in the Discord channel with like a thumbs up or a thumbs down, depending on what your opinion is on whether you would be able to bounce a permanent or not. Usually I like to get a few people idea about what's happening. Now, when I went through and I researched this interaction, I actually thought this was quite counterintuitive. Because if you look at it, it does say when it connives this way. So to a lot of people, I think it would make sense that the Psychic Pickpocket would have to be in play during the conniving part for that triggered ability to trigger. But in fact, that is not the case. It turns out that the way that this works is Psychic Pickpocket has one big ability, and the big ability has multiple things that it does. So one of the things that it does is it connives. And another thing that it does is it sets up a delayed triggered ability, or perhaps a reflective triggered ability, depending on how you like to conceptualize that stuff, that is set up during the resolution of the enters the battlefield triggered ability. So what that means is that when that enters the battlefield ability resolves, those are the things that are going to happen. It's going to connive, and it's going to set up an ability that says when it connives, then return a permanent. And so because of that, it does not matter whether the Psychic Pickpocket is or is not in play at the time when the conniving happens, because the triggered ability that triggers when it connives this way does not exist on the Psychic Pickpocket. It exists somewhere out in the game land after having been set up by the resolution of that. So that I think is kind of an interesting interaction, and definitely one that I would expect to see, and definitely one I would expect to field some questions about, because that is certainly not you know, immediately obvious that's how it would work that way. At least for me, it wasn't. So the next guild mechanic that I wanted to talk about would be Casualty. So Casualty is, as an additional cost to cast the spell, you may sacrifice a creature with power 3 or greater. You know, obviously the numbers can change depending on what number it is. And when you sacrifice such a creature, then you copy the spell and you can choose a new target. So a couple of points about that. You sacrifice as an additional cost to cast the spell. That of course would happen during the process of casting the spell. And the way it's worded, you only get to sacrifice one creature. It's not possible for you to sacrifice more creatures to get more copies. So for this mechanic, this is another kind of question that I expect to come up a fair amount as far as Casualty is concerned. So the idea would, of course, be that we have our prowess creature here, and what we want to do is we want to cast the Flawless Forgery, and of course the Flawless Forgery, being a non-creature spell, is going to cause the prowess to trigger. So we want to set it up in such a way that the prowess increases our power to 3 in time for us to sacrifice the Vedalken Blademaster to Casualty the Flawless Forgery. And if you were paying attention closely to the last part that we had talked about, it turns out that is not possible for this reason. The prowess triggers when you cast a non-creature spell. In other words, it triggers after the entire process of casting the spell has been completed. Unfortunately, the Casualty is worded such that the sacrificing a creature part happens during the process of casting the spell. And so therefore it is not possible to manipulate things in such a way that the Vedalken Blademaster's prowess has resolved or even has triggered by the time the Casualty asks you to sacrifice a creature. So it is in fact not possible to make this play the way that we're hoping to. Next skilled mechanic is Blitz, and Blitz is a fun one. Certainly the one that has the most stuff going on, so to speak. So casting a spell with Blitz is basically just like casting a spell, except that we're paying the Blitz cost instead of the normal mana cost. So it still goes on the stack, it still can be countered, it still interacts with stuff that asks you to cast a spell or looks for casting a spell. But if you cast the spell using the Blitz ability, then it gets a couple of special things tacked onto it. So one is that it gets haste, and it has this ability, when it dies, draw a card. And 2 is you have to sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So a couple of points about that. You get to draw a card if it dies for any reason. So it doesn't have to die in combat, and it doesn't have to die from sacrificing it during the end step. So you can do anything you want that causes it to die, but it does have to die. In other words, it does have to be put into your graveyard from the battlefield in order to count as dying and get you to draw a card. If you copy a card that was cast with Blitz, such as like with a clone, then it will not have any of the other effects. So you won't have to sacrifice it, you won't have haste, and you won't draw a card if it dies. And that's because of the way continuous effects work, right? So this gaining haste and gaining this ability, both of those are things that happen in a later layer than the copying. And they are also not worded, if you look in the comprehensive rules, in such a way that it changes the copyable information of the Blitz card. The way that something like, for example, a phantasmal image does actually change the copyable information of the phantasmal image, which is why if you clone a phantasmal image, it still does get sacrificed if you target it. But this is not worded in a similar way. So it's basically just your generic adding the abilities on after the fact, which is, again, something that copy effects do not copy. So you won't get any of the extra stuff if you clone a blitzed card. So another interesting thing with Blitz is how it interacts with Dress Down. Right, so if you notice, this dies, draw a card, and the gaining haste, those are both abilities, right, that the Girder Goons gains, right? So because of how dependencies work, when we get to layer 6 and we try to decide what abilities the Girder Goons has, we're going to come up with a situation where applying the Dress Down first is going to take away the Blitz ability from Girder Goons, and therefore it's not going to have this thing that wants to give it haste and the thing that wants to give it when this dies draw a card. And so therefore there's a dependency that exists, and the Dress Down will make it so that you will not have either of those on the blitzed card. But it gets better. If you're the Dress Down player, it gets better. If you're the Girder Goons player, it gets a lot worse. Because if you look at how this is worded, the sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step, that is actually something that gets set up at the time when you are casting the Blitz card. And that's the reason why it doesn't say, and it also gains sacrifice this at the beginning of the next end step if it was blitzed or something like that. So what actually happens is, as the Blitz spell is resolving, then the game sets up a triggered ability that says sacrifice this at the beginning of the next end step. And it works the exact same way as the Psychic Pickpocket thing did. That ability exists out in the game somewhere. It does not exist on the Girder Goons, and so therefore the Dress Down is not able to take it away, which means you still do have to sacrifice the Blitz card at end of turn, even though it doesn't have haste and it doesn't have the thing that lets you draw a card. So that's actually very sad. The Dress Down actually hard counters the Blitz. But on the plus side, depending on whose turn it is, you might still get to draw a card because the Dress Down gets sacrificed during the end step also. So like if we do sacrifice it during the end step, if it's the appropriate player's turn, it still will have that ability that says when it dies, draw a card on it. So that's a possibility. But if you remember how Ragavan, like dashing a Ragavan works with Dress Down, it works the exact same way with Blitz. That's because the wording on Blitz is very similar to what the wording on the dash mechanic is. So that is a pretty fun interaction. I'm not sure if any of the Blitz cards are going to be seen play in any formats with Dress Down, but if they do, then that's how it would work. So this is a little bit of a technical explanation for exactly why that is, and you can see here in the comprehensive rules definition for Blitz that if the Blitz cost was paid, sacrifice the permanent this spell becomes at the beginning of the next end step. So that does indicate that we're talking about an ability that the spell has that sets up at the beginning of the next end step. However, with this other part where it gains haste and it gains the draw card, you can see that refers to as long as this permanent's Blitz cost was paid. So that is some backup for the claim that I made earlier that those are abilities that the permanent would actually have on the battlefield. So next up would be Alliance, and I'm not going to lie, Alliance is, I would not say that it's like a super complicated mechanic. Really, it's just an ability word. And in fact, we've had lots of cards that have similar types of abilities that trigger whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control. So it works exactly the same as any of those. A couple of quick hits here. Alliance abilities trigger for each creature that enters the battlefield. So if you have like multiple creatures entering the battlefield under your control at the same time, then the Alliance ability would trigger for each one of those creatures. And if multiple abilities trigger at the same time, they're put on the stack in app-nap order. That part's probably not going to matter too much because the alliances are all, of course, creatures entering the battlefield under your control. So the same person is probably going to control all of the triggers in cases like this. But if a player controls multiple triggered abilities, then that player decides their relative order. So that means that the Blitz player or the Alliance card player would be able to stack those triggered abilities in whatever order that they wanted. And then we get to shield counters, and this one is actually like it's kind of a toss up for me between Blitz and the shield counters. Which one I think is like the most rules difficulties, but they're both up there. So what shield counters do is they will save you in two specific cases. So if this permanent would be destroyed as the result of an effect, you remove a shield counter from it instead. And if this permanent would be dealt damage, then you prevent that damage and remove a shield counter from it. So those are the only two times where a shield counter is going to help you out at all. So for example, some stuff that it wouldn't help you out for would be if you're a legendary permanent and another legendary permanent with the same name. That would not be a case of getting destroyed or dealt damage, of course. But as far as the state-based action that says, put it in your graveyard is concerned, that is not what is happening. And so the shield counter will not save you in that instance, nor will it save you if you have 0 toughness, because again, that is not being destroyed. The putting into your graveyard is not worded in such a way, and so therefore it does not count. So those are a couple of potential gotchas that the shield counters have. So those are some good ways to get rid of creatures with shield counters. This is another good way. If you call in a professional, you're going to be dealing 3 damage to any target, and damage can't be prevented this turn. So it helpfully reminds you in the reminder text that shield counters don't prevent this damage. But if you remember what the shield counter says, it says if damage would be dealt, then prevent that damage and remove a shield counter. Now, we aren't able to prevent the damage because that's what it says right on the card, but we are able to remove a shield counter. So what would actually happen is the shield counter would be getting removed and the 3 damage would still happen. And so that means that you would be taking the disciplined duelist out if you had to call in a professional. Now let's say we had 2 shield counters on there. So what would happen in that case is the 3 damage would still not be prevented by either, by the effect that says there's a shield counter. Even though there's 2 shield counters, it's still not getting prevented because it's, can't be prevented this turn. So we're going to be marking 3 damage on the disciplined duelist. And then we're going to be removing a shield counter from it. So after that happens, the game is going to perform state-based actions. And the thing that makes you go to the graveyard when you have lethal damage on you actually is counted as destroying a creature. However, if you look very carefully here, it says if the permanent would be destroyed as the result of an effect. And that would not be getting destroyed as the result of an effect. It would be getting destroyed as a result of a state-based action. And so, therefore, even with a second shield counter, the professionals will still be able to destroy the disciplined duelist. So that was a little bit on the, kind of sad, but that is how that works. And another thing, my heart was really sad when I saw this one. Actually, it was really happy when I saw this one. And when I thought of it, right? So, but here's an interesting card from the old days. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, put a shield counter on Palliation Accord. Wow, that's pretty cool. So there's some other card that has shield counters, and that's pretty cool. So what do you think? Do you think the Palliation Accord can be destroyed? What is let's see. So as we're seeing in the chat, yes, we first of all, there is a very important point, which is that counters of the same name or description are interchangeable. So if this was getting shield counters, it would work because they're just as much shield counters as the ones that people intended them to be shield counters. But yeah, unfortunately, the Fun Please came up on this one, and they were not happy. So the Palliation Accord has been errated so that it actually gets palliation counters, which of course are not shield counters, and so therefore the palliation counters are going to do absolutely nothing to stop it from getting destroyed. So very unfortunate. I was very sad when I saw that was happening because I thought that would have been a really cool question. But I guess it is kind of one of those things where like nobody would be expected to know that unless they looked it up, that it wouldn't work that way. So I suppose that's the reason why they changed it. So yeah. That is the way that the Palliation Accord would work, and this is not a mechanic that is specific to any of the factions in the set, but it is a returning mechanic. So it's Hideaway, and they've actually made several functional changes to the way that Hideaway works. So first of all, Hideaway didn't used to have a number. It used to always be 4. Of course, now that they have a number attached to it, they, all the old existing Hideaway cards have been errated so that they have Hideaway 4. It is that change is not really that unexpected. I believe I remember reading one time that they wish that they could have put Threshold and made that be Threshold 7. Because it opened up a lot more design space. But the other thing is that Hideaway used to mean this permanent enters the battlefield tapped. However, that is no longer the case. So Hideaway no longer means this permanent enters the battlefield tapped. It used to be that was baked into what the definition of Hideaway was, but that was also kind of confusing. In the original set, when they had the Hideaway in Lorwyn, I believe they did that because the card text boxes were getting too long and they needed a way to like shorten it somehow. But at the same time, it was one of those things where when they revisited the mechanic years later, people did not realize that was how it was supposed to be. And they had it Hideaway on some uncommon out of one of the Modern Masters sets. And like nobody remembered that card was supposed to enter the battlefield tapped. So now all the Hideaway cards specifically say they come into play tapped, except for wiretapping and like all the new ones, which do not, because, you know, that's not part of what Hideaway does anymore. So there is one other, and this is an important functional change, which is the cards are now put on the bottom of your library in a random order. And this is my vote for like least necessary change, and like most gotcha-ish change. I imagine that there will probably be several there will probably be several people who don't realize that this has changed since the Hideaway of lore, because a lot of the Hideaway cards that saw play, that was an integral part of why the card was as good as it was, is because you did get to put them on the bottom of the graveyard, or on the bottom of your library in any order. Is there a functional change due to effects that could cause the Hideaway lands to enter untapped? No, all of the original Hideaway cards have been errated so that they say this enters the battlefield tapped. So now it's not Hideaway making them enter the battlefield tapped, it's now a separate ability making them enter the battlefield tapped. So yeah, there you go. And there is one other thing that I wanted to talk about with the Hideaway. Well, there's a couple of them. Actually, Hideaway has a couple of really cool interactions with it. So this is the first one that I thought of. And of course, this isn't really a new interaction. This could have worked just as well with the old Hideaway. But you know, now it is probably going to get brought up to the forefront. So let's say we've got the wiretapping, and you notice that Hideaway 5 definitely does say when this enters the battlefield. You look at the top 5. So what that means is that when wiretapping enters the battlefield, that is a triggered ability. So you could indeed copy this triggered ability and choose new targets for it. So that means that you would be able to exile 2 cards with the wiretapping. So let's take a look. So who thinks that you can cast both cards? You can again use the thumbs up and the thumbs down to indicate your responses to this. So we've got a couple of people saying cast 1, but we have the majority of the people saying, oh, it's starting to catch back up again. Ooh, maybe some people are changing their minds now. So this is one of those questions where, like, if you didn't happen to know the appropriate rule, you don't really like have a way to get the answer right. So this is the appropriate rule. If we have a pair of linked abilities, which Hideaway cards have linked abilities, and one of them refers to a single object as the exiled card or something similar, and the ability has been copied, so it exiled multiple cards, then the ability refers to each of the exiled cards. And if that ability performs any action on the card, it performs that action on each exiled card. So yes, you do get to double exile. So if you look carefully, this is important. The Hideaway cards do say you may play the exiled card. So it does match that template. And that is important because I cut the rest of the text out of here because it's not relevant for this case, because all of the Hideaway cards are worded the same way. However, the rest of this says if it says performs any actions on a exile or a card, then it performs that action on one card of your choice. So because the Hideaway cards are all worded cast the exiled card instead of cast an exiled card, then that means that you do in fact get to cast both. So that's kind of cool. Again, it's for sure a trivia thing, because if you didn't know that this rule here, if you didn't have this rule ready to go, then you wouldn't know the answer to that. But that is what the answer is. Now there is one, and this is kind of an interesting. This one I thought was really interesting when I came upon this. So can anybody in the chat identify what the difference is between wiretapping and Smuggler's Buggy as far as the Hideaway is concerned? And there is a big, like, significant gameplay impacting difference, and it's not the fact that one of them has Hideaway 5 and the other one has Hideaway 4. And yes, we have got it. Very, very well done from the chat. One of them says that you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. The other one, Smuggler's Buggy, says you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. And that is a difference. That is, in fact, a legitimate gameplay difference, because if you have a land, you are able to play a land, but you are not able to cast a land. Which means that the Smuggler's Buggy is not able to hide away a land and let you play it, whereas the wiretapping would be able to. I am not sure why they did this. It is extremely confusing, because this is the only Hideaway card that has been printed to date that does not let you hide away into a land. So I again am not sure. Maybe the buggy is living up to its living up to its English name here. There's no reason why you couldn't play a land during combat. The Hideaway lands from the original set all were able to do that. You're perfectly allowed to make that play. You are not allowed to play a land during another player's turn. So if you were to activate one of the Hideaway lands, you would not be able to play the land during an opponent's turn, even though the game says that you can, because there's another rule that specifically says you cannot play the land. But again, the Smuggler's Buggy triggers when you deal combat damage to a player. So presumably it would be your turn anytime you would be able to play that card. So that would be one potential reason that I could see them doing that, is to like avoid confusion that way. But yeah, this one's got me stumped. If anybody can come up with a plausible reason why there would be that difference between the Smuggler's Buggy and all the other cards, definitely let me know, because I'd be very interested to hear about that. So, but yeah, that is Hideaway. That is all the mechanics in the set, or at least all the ones that I prepared like interesting stuff about. So now we're ready to go to the bonus rounds. So what does everybody think? We've got the Blood Moon, we've got the Rakish Revelers. What do you think? Can we tap for white? So the idea would, of course, be that we have a Blood Moon in play, and we use the Rakish Revelers to exile ability on a non-basic land of some sort. So we've got some. Again, we've got most of the opinion is that we can tap for white, and then we've got a couple of people who think it can only tap for red. And we've got one person. We've got a couple of people who are on the timestamps. The timestamps thing. So okay, this is good. Whenever you post a rules question and you get like everybody saying the right answer, that's great that everybody knows the right answer. But like as a rules question writer, it makes you feel a little sad that you didn't get anybody. But like with this one here, yeah, there definitely was a division of opinion. So what actually happens is, if you take a look at the Blood Moon says non-basic lands are mountains. Now that is a type, subtype, and super type changing effect, which takes place in layer 4, and the Rakish Revelers is target land gains tap, add red, green, or white. And so that is an ability adding, which happens in layer 6. So it in fact does not matter at all which order these entered the battlefield or started affecting that land. Either way, the land will always have the ability to tap for red, green, or white, because the Rakish Revelers happens in a later layer than the Blood Moon. Yes, just like Chromatic Lantern, it works exactly the same sort of way, because you are giving the land an ability that is a later layer than changing its type. And so, interestingly enough, there's not one but 2 cards in the set that take advantage of this rule here, and so the bootlegger stash, of course, would then work exactly the same way, being that the lands you control would always have tap create a treasure token, regardless of what order those two enchantments entered the battlefield. So that's good. Any questions on the first like challenge question here? All right, well, let's move on to another one, and this one was actually submitted just for this conference by one of the organizers. So thank you very much for supplying this question. It's actually very interesting. So we've got the Broker Hideout and the Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth. So the idea is, can we tap the Hideout for black? Obviously, that would be you play the Broker's Hideout, and before you sacrifice it, you want to add a black mana to your mana pool. So we've got a couple of no's, but mostly yes. So yes, this is in fact correct. The ability that makes you sacrifice it uses the word win, which means it is a triggered ability. And that means that it goes on the stack and can be responded to by like any other triggered ability. And the Urborg is a continuous effect, which means there's no time that the Broker's Hideout is on the battlefield that it does not have the swamp typing, and therefore it will be able to tap for a black in response to that triggered ability that makes you sacrifice it. And of course, there's nothing in the ability that references being tapped, so that's not going to interfere with you getting a basic land and putting it onto the battlefield. So that the rest of the Broker's Hideout ability will work exactly normally. Yeah, it's just like Urza's Saga, tapping it for mana or tapping it for another construct token if you were on Chapter 3. So yep, works exactly like that. So yeah, very, very cool question, and yeah, it does make you feel kind of sneaky when you pull something like this off. So that is for sure. If you stifle the enter the battlefield sack, well, then the triggered ability. So that is an interesting fact. It depends on what you stifle. Obviously, you could stifle the when Broker's Hideout enters the battlefield, sacrifice it, or you could stifle the when you do search your library. If you're the opponent of Broker's Hideout player, you probably want to stifle the when you do search your library for basic forest type of ability, because if you do that, then they still have to sacrifice it, but they don't get a land. If you stifle the when Broker's Hideout enters the battlefield, then it will not have to get sacrificed, but if you sacrifice it later, then the when you do doesn't mean when you sacrifice it at all. It means when you sacrifice it using this part of the triggered ability that went before it. So this is exactly the same sort of a thing as what we saw with the Psychic Pickpocket, or again what we saw with the well, mostly it's similar to the Psychic Pickpocket. There was another example that might be a little bit less intimately connected than those two. But yeah, the when you do is set up as part of the resolution of this other triggered ability. And so that means that if you counter the when it enters the battlefield triggered ability, then you will not get any of the rest, including the part where when you sacrifice it, you get a basic land. So yeah, that is that question. Another really cool interaction. So next up, we've got our old friend Luxior, and I gotta say this one here is it's right up there with it's right up there with some of these other guys with most rules questions in the set. So Big Daddy Luxior has several interesting rules interactions, and we'll go through. The first thing that I want to do is like talk about these infinite combos, because I feel like, I personally got asked a lot about the infinite combos involving this card. And I'm sure that the players that you interact with are probably going to be interested in those infinite combos too. So certainly some stuff that would be good to know, and some of it is like a little bit on the not intuitive side. So certainly it helps if you've seen it before. So here's how this would work. This is an infinite combo. What would happen is the Devoted Druid has an ability that says put a -1/-1 counter on Devoted Druid to untap it. So what you would do is you would activate that ability, and then it's getting -1/-1 because it got a -1/-1 counter, but it's also getting +1/+1 because the equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each counter on it It doesn't say anything about what kind of counters. So it's actually going to still be a 0/2 after you untap it. And then you would, of course, be able to tap it for green. And then you can continue doing, you can tap it for green as many times as you'd like. So you get infinite green mana. So yeah, pretty cool combo. I wonder if Wizards was aware of this. Yeah, I think they probably were. I just have a feeling that they might have been aware of this combo. So yeah, they have it in the Commander series for this set. They have Devoted Druid. So yep. So okay, the other infinite combo that I heard like a bunch of hype about was this one here, right? So the Saheeli Rai plus Luxior, Giada's Gift, is also an infinite combo, but of a slightly different nature. So the way that this one works is you would use the Luxior equipped Planeswalker to equip to the Saheeli Rai, right? So then you would use the Saheeli Rai -2 targeting that Saheeli Rai, right? So that's possible because it says to create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature that you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So this Luxior making the Saheeli Rai into a creature will make it so that the Saheeli Rai can -2 itself. And then, of course, the tokens that you generate with Saheeli Rai are also artifacts, which means that they are also able to activate the -2 targeting themselves. So the idea would be you sacrifice or you make a copy of the Saheeli Rai using the -2 ability, and then they're still legendary, right? Because the equipped permanent isn't a planeswalker anymore, but like changing something's card types does not change its super types, which legendary is. So it still is legendary, which means you would still have to put one in the graveyard. So what you would need to do is you would need to put the Saheeli Rai that you already activated a loyalty ability of in the graveyard, and then the token is not equipped with the Luxior, but that doesn't matter because it's an artifact. So you can still use the -2 ability to target the Saheeli Rai token. And then you keep on doing that, right? So like you make another Saheeli Rai token, and then you bin the first token, and then you make another token, and you bin the second token, and you keep on going like that. Yeah, you get infinite Saheeli Rais entering the battlefield. They are artifacts, so if you had like a Disciple of the Vault, that would be a good one to use with that, because they're all, of course, going to the graveyard. Alter the Brood, that was another finisher that I heard thrown around. You can mill people out. So that's the way that combo works. So yeah, that one, again, certainly a little bit more complicated, I think. You have to like at least explain it a little bit. So, but yeah, it's well, you know, the mana, the infinite mana one is 2/3 of a combo too, right? Like the infinite mana doesn't do anything by itself. You gotta like have a like, you know, mana sink to win the game. Okay, and then there's one more combo with the Luxior, and this isn't actually a combo, but what it is a lot of rules questions, right? Because you know. They do have some helpful reminder text in here that says the loyalty abilities of the Planeswalker can still be activated, but there's still a couple more rules questions that I could see coming up. So let's say that we have the Luxior and it's attached to the Gideon, and so we use the Gideon +2. So the Gideon +2 says that during target opponent's next turn, creatures that player controls attack Gideon Jura if able. Well, here's the thing: if Gideon Jura is not a Planeswalker, then that would mean that no creatures would be able to attack it, because this isn't Yu-Gi-Oh! Or any of those other games that like have it so you can attack creatures directly. So that is not, in fact, going to, you know, they're not going to be able to attack Gideon Jura even if they wanted to. So no creatures will be attacking Gideon Jura. They can attack, you know, as they please. So the +2 ability isn't really going to do anything. Other than put 2 loyalty counters on it, which is pretty good. Because, yeah, you've got 6 loyalty counters on it. So here's another interesting fact. If the game does not have a power and toughness defined for a creature, the default is 0/0. So that means that normally a Planeswalker that is equipped with the Luxior is going to be a 0/0. Right? But it's going to be getting +1/+1 for each counter on it, which usually they'll have loyalty counters on them. Now, another interesting fact is that loyalty counters getting removed from Planeswalkers when they are dealt damage, that is something that relies on the thing being a Planeswalker. So if the Gideon Jura is not a Planeswalker, then even if we lightning bolted the Gideon Jura and dealt 3 damage to it, That would be just like if we lightning bolted a normal 6/6 creature. You know, we're not removing any of the loyalty counters on it. It's like, you know, if we lightning bolted a creature that had 6+1/+1 counters on it, right? We wouldn't expect to remove those +1/+1 counters on it. Is the default power toughness 0/0 rule new to SNC? No, they actually added that when vehicles were first introduced, because if something, you know, there were ways that you could make something animate a non-vehicle, and then it wouldn't have a power toughness printed on it. So that was actually a while ago. So one other kind of interesting thing. Some people mentioned it in the chat, but I wanted to point it out loud here. Once the Gideon becomes a 6/6 creature, that thing I said before about it not having a power toughness defined for it, it's not going to be the case anymore. Because if it's a 6/6 creature, hey, guess what? That means it's a 6/6. So we have a power and toughness defined for it. So it's a 6/6, and it's getting +2 or +1/+1 for each loyalty counter on it. So it's going to be a lot. Final important point is, if we animate the Gideon, it says human soldier or creature that's still a planeswalker. Now that is an interesting line of text. It might make you think that it's going to become a planeswalker, but that is not how it works. What that line of text means is it stays being a planeswalker if it was one already. It doesn't mean it gets to become a planeswalker again if it wasn't one already. So actually, the Luxior attached to the Gideon Jura, it will be a legendary creature with no creature types, and not a planeswalker, and not a Gideon either, because if it loses the planeswalkeriness, it loses all of its planeswalker types, such as Gideon. And then if we animate with this ability, it's going to be a 6/6 base plus like however many loyalty counters it has, human soldier creature, and that's still a planeswalker does not mean it's going to become a planeswalker again. It's just a 6/6 human soldier creature. That's legendary still, obviously. So yeah, if there were some other card type that this Gideon had, that's still a planeswalker would allow it to keep that type. And I actually had a question that I did a couple weeks ago regarding Imposter Mech plus Gideon, and you can look that interaction up if you're so inclined, because that is a very good example of that text having a somewhat non-intuitive result. But that's another kind of cool situation that can come up. So yeah, that is Luxior plus Gideon, and that's all the like Luxior questions that I had. Thank goodness, because this one is like, you know, I think probably among the highest rules question things that you would expect to see out of this set. So, all right. Next, we got this one. Now, this is a really fun question. I really like this one here. Okay, the idea is we've got the March of the Machines out. So, if you didn't know, this is an artifact, not an enchantment. So, the March of the Machines is going to be making the Halo Fountain into a creature, right? So, what we want to do is activate this top ability here, the making a 1/1 white and green citizen creature token. So, of course, the idea is, can we do that if we have no other creatures in play? And so, oh, this is actually interesting. We've got a couple of people who are saying yes. We got a couple of people who are saying no. So, what's actually going to happen is, this is a creature, right? Like that's what this says. This is a creature. So we have a cost to activate this ability, and the cost is a white mana and tapping this permanent and untapping a tapped creature you control. So that is the cost to activate this ability. So if we paid a white mana and then tapped this permanent and then untapped this permanent, because at this point it would be tapped. So this is a different part of the cost than this. And so, therefore, you can pay those in any order. So it turns out you can actually activate this ability. If you have a white, you can activate this ability whether Halo Fountain is tapped or untapped, which I thought was really cool when I figured that out. Right, because you could pay the white and then untap this creature and then tap it, and that would be a valid way to activate. Or you could pay the white and you could tap this creature and then untap it, or go the other way. So that's really cool. Okay, so now I can already feel through the screen the energy radiating out at me of everybody in the chat thinking, well, Dave, that's pretty cool. Does that mean that if we had the Halo Fountain as a creature, we could use the white, tap, and untap 2 untapped creatures by, tapping or untapping the Halo Fountain and then tapping it and then untapping it? Would we be able to activate the second ability using that technology? And unfortunately, the answer to that question is a little bit less cool than the previous one. And so, yeah, as some people in the chat is pointing out, this cost says untap 2 tapped creatures. So it turns out that the Halo Fountain is only 1 creature. So it is not 2 creatures. So therefore, it would not be a valid way to pay this cost by untapping the same creature twice. So that is in fact not a possible play that you would be able to make. But I thought that the like using this top ability here without an additional creature was still pretty cool though. So yep, there you go. That is and again, you can activate this ability whether Halo Fountain is tapped or untapped, which I thought was so cool. So yeah. That is a fun little interaction and definitely something that I would expect to see in some games at a lot of kitchen tables around the country. So now we've got this one. And this one is that we have reached my favorite. This is my personal favorite rules question out of the entire set. And part of it is because it's like kind of thematic. The cards that are involved are like kind of related to each other. But it's also because it's kind of a cool and unexpected, at least to me anyway, unexpected answer. Right, so the question is like we've got a Brass Knuckles and we've got a doubling season, and then like when we play the Brass Knuckles, what happens, right? So of course the answer is going to be a lot of doubling, right? But exactly how much doubling, right? So anybody who watched my channel earlier today is probably going to know the answer to this one already. But the way that this works is if an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control. So we see that when the spell gets cast, we copy it, and the reminder text helpfully tells us that the copy becomes a token. So if you take that at face value, it sure does kind of seem like you would be getting an additional Brass Knuckles token with the doubling season. But it turns out that that's actually not the case. So we do have this rule here that specifically calls out this type of situation, and the token is not created for the purposes of any replacement effects or triggered abilities that refer to creating a token. And so that would also mean that in addition to doubling season not interacting with this, like Chatterfang would not interact with it, or like Benny Brax would not interact with it, or let's see, Crafty Cut Purse, another possible thing. None of those are going to interact with the copy entering the battlefield of Brass Knuckles because of this rule here, and that's kind of unsatisfying. But I think there's one that's called Junk Winder. That does work because Junk Winder says whenever a token enters the battlefield, there's also like anything that looks for you to copy a spell, that would, because you are copying a spell, that is in fact something that would work with the Brass Knuckles. But yeah, the doubling season is not going to give you an additional one. So I like to think about like a little bit about why this rule exists. It seems kind of arbitrary, but like if you think about what the English word created means, created doesn't mean like you turned from something into something else, right? It means that there was nothing and now there's something. So if you look at how a normal, like something that like, a Ragavan attacks you and when it deals damage, create a treasure token, right? There was nothing and now there's a treasure token. So that is that is in fact how that would work. That is creating a token. But this is not creating a token. This is a token turns, a copy of a spell turns into a token, which is not the same. So yeah, that is all of the questions that I had prepared for us tonight. So if there are any other questions about that or any other, I will welcome them in the chat. Not going to say that I'll be like prepared with a super depth rules reference for planeswalkers losing their planeswalker subtype when they lose their planeswalker type. Yes, there is a rules reference for that. It is... All right, someone else beat me to it. Good job. I was like, had to reach and turn on my phone. That's a very big disadvantage. So yeah, that is in fact the rule that I was thinking of in my head. So yes, that is the reason why a planeswalker that loses its planeswalker types, loses its planeswalker typing, also loses its planeswalker subtypes. So the Gideon will not be a Gideon while it's equipped with the Luxior. Which is kind of cool because there's one Gideon that says like whenever it attacks, if you attacked with like 2 or more non-Gideon creatures or something like that. So with the Luxior, with the help of that card, you could attack with the Gideon and have it count itself as a not Gideon creature. Because of course the effects of that sort are looking at the card types and subtypes rather than the name of the card. So yeah, that's kind of cool. Any other questions? And if not, then that's fine. You can always email me, judgingftw@gmail.com. But yeah, if that's all, then I thank everybody for coming out here and showing up to this presentation today, and I hope everyone has a great night.